Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's now time for another one of Mr. Owen's Lectures. But wait, there's more. This is a special edition. What edition is it? This is Africa. I've even got my t-shirt on. Let's get cracking. This is the Scramble for Africa. The definition of the Scramble for Africa is when European countries competed against each other to claim territory in Africa. You see, as the Industrial Revolution is heating up and takes off and takes hold of Europe, Europe starts to grow by leaps and bounds, and factories become an essential part of their economic infrastructure. And European countries decide to take resources from other countries to supply their factories. One of the biggest continents on Earth, and in fact it's the second largest continent on Earth, is Africa. It's just south of Europe. Take a look at this map. It's right there. And Europe decides what better place to get resources from than Africa. So they start to go into Africa, different countries in Europe, and they start to take over pieces of it, and they start to have conflicts with each other. So rather than fight each other, they decide, hey, let's get together, let's have a meeting, and let's decide how to cut up Africa like a pie. Pie. Uh-oh, that's time for a fun fact! It's time for a fun fact! Fun fact, my favorite pie is, what do you think? Did you guess it? It's peach cobbler. Peach cobbler was the correct answer. That is my favorite pie. If you said banana cream, that was my favorite pie as a kid, but no nuts. When I was a little kid, I didn't like nuts. What is your favorite pie? Oh, gee, Mr. Owen, this fun fact didn't have anything about Africa in it, man. What are you doing in my Africa video, Shaggy? Zoinks, man, I don't know. Well, Shaggy. Scooby, Shaggy, both of you two, get out of my lecture. All right, I'll give you a fun fact on Africa. You take a look at the map again, and you look at the bottom right, you've got Madagascar. It's an island off the coast of Africa. Madagascar is cool, and it's really unusual. If you ever get a chance to watch an animal documentary, it basically has its own animal infrastructure that doesn't exist in a lot of other countries, and one of those examples is the lemur. The lemur is a super cool animal. If you've ever seen Madagascar, King Julian, and all that kind of stuff, that is a lemur. There's a whole bunch of different types of lemurs, and they only live in Madagascar. It's totally on the top of my bucket list. Additional fun fact, this is my dog. His name's King Julian, after the ultimate lemur. And the other dog you see sniffing him, that's the Fusa. And the Fusa is what hunts lemurs on Madagascar. They look like giant coyote cats. We say, hi, King Julian. Isn't he cute? All right, get out of here, buddy. Now that I've traumatized my dog for your satisfaction, we will continue with the special edition on Africa. So like I said, they're going to have this meeting to divide Africa up like a pie, and they're going to cut it into colonies. This meeting is known as the Berlin Conference, and it takes place from 1984 to 1985. Berlin is in Germany. All these European countries go to Germany, they meet, and they decide on rules and guidelines, and they want to turn Africa into a giant cash crop plantation. What is a giant cash crop plantation? It's a big farm where you take all the crops and you sell them and you make tons of cash. That simple. Okay? All right, and Africa is just loaded to the brim with tons of resources. Africa has a ton of geography. They've got deserts, wetlands, jungles, and so on and so forth. It's unbelievably diverse. And they have everything that you can imagine, from diamonds and coal to ivory, rubber, and even exotic animals that people in Europe are going to want poached and put on display. So there's all sorts of materials in Africa that Europeans are going to want, and it's going to become very sought after. Now again, Africa is very diverse. Geographically, not only is it huge, but there's a whole bunch of different regions in Africa that make it really hard for one country, let's say, to take over Africa. So as a result, most of the countries in Africa are fairly small, and you don't see a giant central government or a giant military. And in fact, today in Africa, there are over 50 countries in Africa. So if you can imagine, it's not only it's huge, there are a ton of countries in it, and there's a ton of different types of places to live, whether it's jungle, whether it's desert, and so on and so forth. So it's going to make it ripe for the pickings when Europe comes in. Because they're smaller countries with not as developed armies and not a giant central government. Okay. Also, Africa has been set back by the slave trade that had gone on a few hundred years prior, and they had taken a lot of slaves out of Western Africa, and that also hurt it and put it back. Now, I typically don't give my opinion, or I do my best to help you decide your own opinion. I'll give you facts and information, and it's your job to have your own opinion, with some exceptions. There are certain people in history that are factually evil. Okay? Some people want to debate whether Columbus was evil or not. Some people could argue that Columbus was a product of his time and was doing his job. Some people could say he did some really bad things, but that's not a fact. That's something that you could debate about Christopher Columbus. Some people in history, though, are evil. Like Adolf Hitler is evil. He's bad. He's a monster, and I will not listen to another side of that. That's just a fact. One of the people that is really, really, really evil that you've probably never heard of, his name is King Leopold II of Belgium. This guy is evil. One of the most evil people to ever live. And at the Berlin Conference, he is going to petition all of Europe to have the rights to the area known as the Congo. And Europe approved it. Even the United States gave him permission to own the Congo. And he wanted to compete with other European nations because he was the king of Belgium, which wasn't as well respected as, let's say, England or Spain or France during this time period. So by getting the Congo, this was a big deal, and that way he could compete with other European powers. So he tells his people of Belgium that they are going to bring Christianity to the Congolese people. People of Congo are known as the Congolese. He said, we're going to spread Christianity. It's going to be great. We're going to save all these savages. And he goes and he hires this guy named Henry Morgan Stanley. And Henry Morgan Stanley was a traveler who had traveled over the Congo a bunch of times and made lots of friends with chieftains down there, and he knew it really well, and he had maps of the region, and he'd explored the Congo. He knew all the chiefs. And King Leopold is going to say, hey, we're going to do great things in the Congo. I need you to win over the people there and get them to listen to us. So Stanley convinces the chiefs to give up some of their lands and sign treaties in exchange for schools being built and hospitals being built and all these things that they were promised. However, King Leopold was a liar. What he did was he had his troops go in, he killed the ruler of the Congo, which was Masiri. They kill him, and then all the chiefs that signed over in this treaty get no schools, nothing, and he completely lies to them, and he rules over the Congo, which was not as advanced. They did not have advanced weapons. They had spears. The Belgians had guns. Gun versus spear, the gun is typically going to win. And like I said, he had convinced his people that he was doing an honorable mission. He lied. And he was violent, and he was cruel. I would show you pictures, but they are disgusting, and I'm not going to do it. Basically what he did is he told the men, you were going to do slave labor, and you were going to farm rubber, and you were going to provide us with rubber. And if you don't, I'm going to cut your hand off. And that's what he did. And if you didn't listen to him, the men got their hands cut off. And if they still didn't listen after getting their hands cut off, they had their families killed or their wives killed. And this was one of the most awful atrocities in history. King Leopold was evil. He did awful things. Hundreds of thousands of Congolese are going to be killed or starved to death because he wouldn't let them farm their own food. And he's going to steal all their rubber. He's going to steal a whole bunch of their supplies. He's not going to build them anything like he had promised. And he's going to use these forced labor campaigns. He's going to use racism. He's going to do all these absolutely awful things to the Congolese people. And like I said, he's cutting their hands off, he's murdering them, and it's terrible. And his actions are seen by other European nations that see it as highly successful because he is making a ton of money, he's getting all this rubber, and they are going to follow suit. So they stop paying a lot of these people for wages, they use them for slave labor in their own homes, which is awful if you think about it. So the Belgians' relationship with Congo is really known for their poor treatment. They're cutting off the hands, they're killing them, they're beating them, they're killing their wives. It's absolutely awful. And they did this because they thought they were racially superior. Okay? They used force, and they never really gave them the money that they had promised. And eventually, the good news of this is, right before his death, King Leopold is ousted, and this comes out. And before he dies, he's like, the whole world knows this guy's a monster. But awful, disgusting thing in history. And you're probably wondering, why do I care? This was like over 100 years ago, Mr. Owen. It's so boring. You should care because what King Leopold and the Belgians did to Congo is still impacting Congo to this day. So after King Leopold leaves and the Belgians lose power, the Congo is going to have one dictator after another, and they're going to fight over the area that's been split into multiple countries many different times. One area is the Congo, one area is a place called Rwanda, which is right next door. And King Leopold, when he went in there, he went and took the minority group known as the Tutsis, and they had been suppressed for thousands of years. And the Hutus, I know the names are a little strange, but go with me. You have the Tutsis, which is the minority group, and you have the Hutus, which is the main faction. And the Hutus ruled over the Tutsis for a long time, no problems. Well, when the Belgians came in there, they put the Tutsis in power over the Hutus, and they weren't the nicest leaders to the Hutus because they had been oppressed for thousands of years. So the Tutsis rose up, suppressed the Hutus. So when the Belgians leave and that deal's broken, the Hutus then rise back up, and they start killing all the Tutsis. But this time it's brutal, and it's known as the Rwandan genocide. And a ton of people are murdered in a genocide. It's one of the worst in history. And this happened in the 1990s. This was not that long ago. And to this day, the Congo and Rwanda are places of violence, and there's always dictators and people rising up and fighting each other, and it's awful. And why don't you hear about it more? Because look at these images. Congo is a giant jungle. It is not easy to get around, and it's not somewhere that typically journalists are going to want to go and document things. A lot of times journalists, when they do cover things in Africa, they don't end up leaving Africa. They die. It's very violent. It's dangerous. So you don't hear a lot about it, but it is a very, very real thing. And again, the Tutsis and the Hutus, the Tutsis were appointed above the Hutus, and then when the Belgians left, the Hutus rose up again, and these two ethnicities battle each other even today, and there's been a lot of mass killings. And this is why imperialism can be really negative. This created tensions between ethnic groups, and this is just one example. And this competition and dictatorship, like I said, continues in the Congo and other parts of Africa. And in the Congo today, there's no peace or prosperity, and it's still something that goes on today.
But Mr. Owen, this is so depressing. Mr. Owen, this is so depressing.
Well, let's end on a high note. First of all, here's a meme to cheer you up, and then it's time for Fun Fact! Let's end with a fun fact! Are there donkeys in Africa?
Yes, I'd like to know if there are donkeys in Africa.
Donkey, get out of here. You're not supposed to be in Mr. Owen's lecture.
Yeah, but he said donkey, and I want to know if there's a donkey in Africa.
There are donkeys in Africa, and in fact, if you bought a donkey in Ethiopia, it would cost you half of your family's annual salary. So they are very valuable.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Donkey, get out of here. All right. There are also 1,500 to 2,000 different languages in Africa, which is crazy to think about. The richest man that ever lived, his name was Mansa Musa. He lived almost 1,000 years ago, and he was worth an estimated in today's dollars between $300 and $400 billion. So basically double the richest man today, Jeff Bezos. It is the second largest continent, and it's almost 12 million square miles. That's big. I mentioned to you earlier, there's over 50 countries in Africa. It has the longest river. What is it? It's the Nile. If you guessed Nile, you are correct. The Nile is the longest river in the world at 4,258 miles. It also is home to the world's hottest desert. Do you know that one? It is the Sahara. If you guessed Sahara, you are correct. Thank you for playing Questions and Fun Facts by Mr. Owen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully I did a good job. I think I did. Yay! That was our special edition, Africa. And hopefully you enjoyed meeting my dogs. Take care of yourselves. I will see you next time.